You're listening to the Travis Makes Money podcast presented by GoHighLevel.com. For a free 30-day trial of the best all-in-one digital marketing software tool on the planet, just go to GoHighLevel.com/Travis. Hey, what's going on, money makers? Welcome back to the Travis Makes Money podcast, where it's our mission to help you make more money. If you're new to the show, we release brand new conversations with unconventional money makers every single day of the week, including the weekends. So you might be listening to this on another feed or something like that right now. So if you have not yet, please be sure to go to your podcast app of choice right now and smash that follow, subscribe button, however it is you like to stay in contact with shows so you never miss an opportunity to make more money. And while you're there, if you want to leave us a quick rating review, I will be eternally grateful, as it really does help us out on the show tremendously. So today on the show, we're going to be talking about writing books with my new friend, Eric Jorgenson. Eric is the CEO of Scribe Media, the largest professional publisher that's in the industry. Scribe helps entrepreneurs, executives, and experts write, publish, and market their books. He's also the author of the Almanack of Naval Ravikant, A Guide to Wealth and Happiness, and the Anthology of Balaji. He's sold over 1 million copies of these books, which is an insane number when you're talking about book sales. He's also an investor in dozens of deep tech startups through Rolling Fund, which is a fund of his with him and a couple of his friends. He also writes at jorgenson.com and hosts the podcast Smart Friends. His blog has educated and entertained more than 1 million readers since 2014. And now he's on a quest to create and eat the perfect sandwich, which is really all I wanted to dedicate the rest of this conversation to. And I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit.
Travis makes sandwiches. Next podcast.
That's podcast number 3 coming shortly. Eric Jorgenson, what's up, dude? Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate you.
Yeah, dude. I initially came across your work, probably like most people, through the Almanack of Naval Ravikant, which proved to be one of those books that is like, I heard somebody say this recently, bro. They were like, reading books is like dating. It's like you want to go find you want to date a lot of books to find the few that you want to spend the most time with, or like making friends or something like that, which I resonated with a lot because they're, you can read through 150 books, but you're really going to resonate with maybe 5 to 10 of them. And you'll probably get more from going back through those same books multiple times rather than just continuing to read for the sake of just continuing to consume more information. And if I were to recommend like a list of 10 books that I've read that I would personally recommend people go through more than once, the Almanack of Naval Ravikant is definitely on that list. So I appreciate you for taking the time to write that.
That's amazing. Thank you. I'm so glad to hear it. I think like the being gifted and being reread are like the 2 greatest compliments a book can receive. So when I hear that people are like, they reread it every year, every other year, or I see a photo of a copy that's just beat to shit and has like notes and dog ears all over it, and it's been in a backpack for 2 years. I'm like, that's
it was one of those ones that I was listening to on audio, and I keep a notes section open in my phone for when I go through audio books, and it's like I'm constantly writing stuff down. I had to stop listening to it at the gym because I just wasn't working out. I'd be at the gym for like 2 hours, just like every 3 minutes, I'm like pulling out my phone to like, oh, that was good. And then I'd like have to go back and rewind 30 seconds button, on Audible. I was just like, rewind. Okay. What did that say again? That was fantastic. You know what I mean?
And then your Apple Watch is giving you shade. Like, are you still working out?
Yeah,
like,
exactly. You're like, calm down, bro. I'm trying to learn too, So yeah, dude, thanks for doing that. Thanks for putting that book together. Where did that come from? What made you go like, somebody's got to do this?
Yeah, it's kind of a confluence of a few things. One, I've been following Naval for like 10 years, like since before he even started AngelList, and he was just blogging at Venture Hacks. So I learned a ton from him, and I really liked so much of the stuff that he shared. And then he went through this whole arc of kind of like had made a ton of money, but then went on the like, okay, now how do I become happy arc?
Yeah.
And then it really became like timeless wisdom. And there was this moment where he went on the Knowledge Project with Shane Parrish. And I think that was one of the greatest podcast interviews to this day ever in the history of podcasting. And I listened to it like 3 times in a week. And it just struck me how much value was in this podcast. And it just broke my heart that it was sort of stuck in this like subculture of podcasting.
Yeah,
people wouldn't know about it. I was like, this is like meditations level stuff. Like so many people need this knowledge. And so I just sort of started. I've always been like a collector and a curator, and so that was what my blog was about, and my Twitter was about, really. And so it was just sort of volunteered for the project, and it took off from there.
Yeah, it definitely took off from there. And now has put you in a position that maybe you never thought you would find yourself in as the CEO of Scribe Media. Um, for those listening who may
Yeah.
not understand the lore behind Scribe, can you give us a brief history and how you ended up at the helm of this company?
Sure, it's rich lore. It's cool. This is so Scribe was founded like 10 years ago by Tucker Max and Zach Obron, two legends. Tucker's like one of the original sort of blog to book guys. And even like way before Substack, even before people were like uh I think it was very early WordPress days. But I remember people like printing out his website and like handing it around.
Mm,
And he had a whole, I think, three or four New York Times best-selling books. He sold millions of books. And so all of his friends were like asking him, like, how do I write books? How do I edit them? How do I market them? How do I get this thing like going? And so he and Zach really started Scribe to be it does everything that a traditional publisher does, but it's a service firm, not a publishing house. So we don't take copyright control. We don't offer advances, but we also don't tell the author what to do. We let them help them and use their book however they want to advance, impact a cause, advance their business, just transition careers, like whatever it is. And they were, I think, 10 years ago, they were visionary in this, like saw that, publishers were going hybrid and so many of these new models are changing. Like the internet just changed everything about publishing and it's just taken the industry a long time to figure it out.
mm.
And they were really early in this, but they're, both those guys are founders and really like after, I think it was like 7 years or so, sort of stepped back and sold the company to a guy they knew who had been working there for a while. And when they sort of stepped back, the company just went off the rails for a little while, and then there was like a very surprising, chaotic bankruptcy that I got caught up in as an author, and I had published my first book with them in 2020, the Almanack of Naval, and I had a life-changing experience. I was like, this is the future. This team is incredible. I felt so indebted to them. I was just a huge fan of Scribe and was so sort of evangelizing them everywhere. And so I was heartbroken when this thing collapsed, and I was stuck in this bankruptcy as an author. I lost a bunch of money personally, and I felt like I should do what I could to sort of help the company and help the team. So I started making phone calls, and I know a few people who buy companies and have holding companies and stuff. And these guys, Save and Xavier of Enduring Ventures, flew to Austin, sort of understood what I was. The vision that I was sort of painting of like why Scribe is a great business, and they worked with the team and the bank and like essentially started a whole new business and brought the thing out of bankruptcy, and very much to my surprise, hired me, called me and asked me to join as CEO after that transition was done. So yeah, it's a very weird side door to the job.
Yeah, yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
What have been kind of the key differences for you now, just stepping into a CEO role, coming from really just like you're more of you're a collector of ideas. You're an author, you're a writer, you're a creator.
Yeah.
How does that mix into the CEO role now?
I mean, in some ways, I just get to be like the company's biggest fan, right? Like I get to go to conferences and podcasts and tell the story of the company and like brag on the team and be like, these people are so talented, and the founders are so visionary to come up with this model and just help people write and publish books, which is a thing I was doing for free as an author anyway. Like I
Yeah.
just like to help authors and think about books and think about businesses and put all the pieces together. I also had a little bit of a background as an operator. I was sort of I had a whole bunch of roles in a venture-backed startup for about 10 years.
Okay.
So I got like
This was
some
prior
experience,
to writing.
sort of like in concert with. It was
Okay.
sort of writing these books was my side project, and for quite a few years,
Yeah.
like nights and weekends. So I was not unfamiliar with it. I'm not like overly shocked to find myself a CEO eventually. It's just like this falling through this weird side door was quite a surprise. But it's been really, really cool to like learn the industry from the inside and get to kind of like combine my like operating like track with my author track and put them in one role now.
So, for those who may have been familiar with Scribe's suite of services and offerings
Yeah.
before, has there been any significant changes to that offer structure, or are you working with authors very similarly to the way that you brought your first book into existence? Like, talk to me a little bit about the how people work with Scribe now.
Yeah, it's really similar, and there's sort of a handful of ways. One, if you've already written a manuscript, you can bring it to us, and we'll help you get it published. Everything between, Google Doc and finished, printed, designed, distributed book. That's a whole bunch of steps, and it's a lot of process that we are just really, really good at running, and have done thousands of times. If, as is the case with like most busy entrepreneurs, like you don't have time to spend 1,000 hours at a keyboard writing your book, and if you haven't written your book yet, you probably might not do it on your own. We pair you with a scribe, and that person will sort of interview you and help you structure the book and help you find the boundaries of it and bridge the gap between your expertise and the craft of writing and what your audience really needs to know. And so we make that really, really easy, foolproof process for somebody to write and publish a book all the way through. Um, if you want a coaching experience where you're doing the writing, we can do that. And we've got sort of that goes all the way up. You can we've got some really like high level white glove services for people that want that experience too.
Yeah. So let's talk the business side of book publishing because
Yeah.
if you want to be an author, typically it's going to take a ton of time
Yeah.
to be able to be an author, meaning that to be a professional author, like to get paid just for the act of writing the book. This is not something that most people can just kind of step into, barring these kind of outlier type experiences like the Douglas Murray type people of the world who got a book published in like age 19 in college. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you're not one of those types of people, it's going to be a long road to actually get paid to write words on pages. Talk to me about the like the why here. Why would somebody listening write a book? What good does it do for them? Because at first it's gonna be a time, energy, and money pit. However,
Yeah.
when done properly and paired with a decent business model, it can actually
Yeah.
be the launch pad to set you up for the next part of your career.
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's a lot of different reasons to write a book in a lot of different contexts that people sort of come into this with. And there's no wrong one that just gives you sort of different advantages and different trade-offs. If you want to make money, like, and everybody will say you can't make money writing books. It's really hard to make money writing books. And that's true. Like in just the return on the royalties themselves, it is really hard to make money writing books. Um, this is a power law game, and so there are a lot of very obvious cases where people are making a ton of money writing books. But it's James Clear, Tim Ferriss, Brene Brown, like, and they eventually then have a whole kind of business around them. But the kind of people in the middle, like if you're making $1 per book, which is like not crazy far off for certainly a traditionally published book. Self-published authors can do quite a bit better than that, but you got to sell 10,000 books to make $10,000. That's 10,000 books is a lot of books. Like,
Yeah.
and that is at the very high end of outcomes.
Right.
So to sell 50,000 or whatever you want your salary to be per year, that's you're really getting into fractions of a percent of people that are making money just on the book themselves. Um, which is why like fiction in particular is hard. Nonfiction is much more common to kind of either pair that with like a speaking career or a consulting business or something like that, where the book does make money on its own, but it feeds into some either more scalable or much higher margin or much higher dollar value business models. And we see a lot of authors who like could not care less about how much money they make on any particular royalties, but the book is this incredible way to build trust at scale with their customers, who then become consultants or clients or business partners or investors or sell their business to you or whatever it is. So there's a lot of different ways you can kind of use that book um, to get that done.
Yeah, it's really like it's your best business card, essentially.
I hear that a lot and I reject it because
Okay.
like a brain dead banana can get a business card. Like anyone can write it. What a book is much a good book, a well-written book that really contains knowledge and expertise is actually much more like a PhD. Like
Mm,
it if and that's the right way to think about it. It is a credential that you should be proud to put in front of whoever the most important person in your network is. If you're a little intimidated by them and you're not proud to put your book in front of them, you didn't invest enough time and effort or put enough of yourself into that book, right? And so we say all the time, like half professional is unprofessional. And it's a very wide world of self-publishing, where people are making all kinds of claims of like, oh, I'm a book cover designer, I'm a ghostwriter, and they're doing it for a few $1,000s, and they're just not good enough to make you look good and professional and build trust with that person in your network.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, like, just post it on a blog. Like, don't half-ass this like really esteemed high status medium. Just like wait until it's the right time for you to do it all in.
Yeah, this one time, man, it was probably when I was first getting into the space, like 7, 8 years ago, and I was at a conference, and somebody gave me a copy of their book, and I was like, "Oh, cool, yeah, thank you, appreciate it." And I opened it up. They were in session, and I was back out at a booth or something, and I opened it up. The first page, in the first sentence on the first page, it said, the opening line was, "It was 3 a.m. in the morning," and I was like, "Done." Close the book, put it back down. I was like, "You can't." 3 a.m. in the morning as the first sentence of your book. Like nobody looked at that and was like, "Yeah, you
Yeah.
don't need 3 a.m. and in the morning. It's the same thing." I was
Yeah.
like, this tells me exactly the amount of effort that you put into this book. I made it past the
Yeah.
terrible cover. I made it past the terrible formatting, got to the
Yeah.
first sentence and was like, "Nope, this is
Yeah.
actively doing the opposite of what you intended it to do."
Yeah, that's a great example. Half professional is unprofessional, and like that's why there are so many little tells in the whole process of book publishing, right? Like how thick is your padding? How well designed is your cover? Do you have the spine adjusted right? Like there's a million. That's not a million. There's actually like 150 individual some steps that we go through across all of these different disciplines to make sure that everything looks really tight and really professional. And you could put your book up next to a traditionally published book in a bookstore, and it is equally as polished and well designed, and that takes time and effort. And I don't begrudge anybody who self-publishes. Like for some people that's the right path, and that's great. But in this context, like we're talking about, if you're trying to like really impress somebody with your execution, like you want to nail every little piece.
Yeah, yeah. So somebody listening that is sitting here like, you know what, I've always thought about writing a book, but I hear so
Mhm.
many conflicting stories about, "Oh, I'll just do the self-published route or do the hybrid model," or "No, you need a traditionally published book. If you want the credibility, you need it to have, Hay House or HarperCollins or some big brand logo on the spine, or else it's not going to do what you want it to do."
Yeah,
I think first of all, that traditional published thing, like I think it still brings a tremendous amount of credibility, but it's also become something that is this isn't 15 years ago even. Like, it's
yeah.
changed so much in such a short period of time. Where do you land? Obviously, like if you were trying to give the least biased advice that you could
For
to
sure.
somebody who's listening, what would your advice to them be when it comes to like selecting a path forward?
Yeah, and I'm not dogmatic about this at all. Like I do think there are people for whom traditional publishing is the right path and the right set of trade-offs that you want to make. Um, like there's a lot to consider. So it's very tough to like summarize this without somebody to kind of make a case study of, because they're
Mm,
all very individual answers. But I would say, as general rules of thumb, if you can get a six-figure advance from a publisher, take it. Because you're sort of de-risking the execution of your book a lot,
mm,
and that's a pretty good deal. Like you are, depending on who you are and what kind of audience you're coming into with, like those are rare. But if you can get it and you're not like all in on this thing and making it, your full-time maximum career, like that's a pretty good deal. If you're getting like a $10,000 advance, you're giving up a lot of control for a relatively small amount of money that might not serve you in the long run.
mm.
You're also signing up for a longer time period. So like you're not necessarily going to choose your launch date. You got to go through the whole like agent getting and proposal process. So if you want to get your book out in time for an event or a birthday or to be your next year's marketing campaign or something like that, and you want that level of control, you're going to want to go, professional publishing, self-publishing, something like that. Um, there's a whole world of hybrid publishers now. So there's a lot of different options in there. Um, but essentially it's a trade-off between like control, and where the ROI comes and just like what risk you're taking. If the most important thing in the world to you is getting on a New York Times bestseller list, then like just keep fighting the fight and try to get traditionally published, because that's how that works.
Yeah. They kind
Being
of
on that
gatekeep
list,
that list, right?
100%. Yeah. And they don't, being on that list doesn't necessarily sell a lot of books, but it might, if you're a speaker, it might help you charge more. Um,
Sure.
but ultimately, I think like the most important credential is an excellent book.
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot of, like, I think there's a decent analogy to the venture world here where like being published by a certain publisher or certain imprint or certain editor or whatever, like is a status symbol for your other author buddies who have any clue like what
Sure.
that is. But like your readers don't care. Like if you ask any person what's their favorite book and then ask them who published it, they have no idea. And so in the venture world, it's like, oh, I got money from Sequoia. And it's like, oh
Right.
wow, you're a badass. Those people are smart. But the customers don't know who the venture, who
Right.
what the venture backing came from. So it's no guarantee of success. It's no guarantee of status. Um, Ultimately, what really matters most is a great book. And I think for most people in an entrepreneurial context, especially if they're building a business alongside it, there's a huge, huge value in flexibility, controlling your own ROI and your reinvestment rate, and just writing the book that serves you the most rather than ceding that control to somebody else.
Yeah, probably the scariest thing to me, man. It's like getting a tattoo to me. It's like this the
Yes.
commitment that's a lifelong commitment that would be extremely painful and expensive to undo.
Yeah.
Meaning that like if you give if if the reason publishers give you the advance is because they own all of the intellectual property that you just wrote, like
Yes.
everything. So they could there could be some bad deal later on down the road, something goes on in your personal or public life or something, and they could just take it off the shelves and you
Or
have
edit
no
it.
repercussions.
Right. Like they're in like the kind of last few years, they were like editing Dr. Seuss's book because they owned the copyrights and they could, and just like pushing updates to digital forms. I mean, I've heard some horror stories, man. There are very few like true one-way doors in life, and those traditional publishing contracts are often there. I mean, people get a $30,000 advance, and then there's creative differences, and they end up paying, you know, more than that to get out of the deal and get their
Right.
own book back plus legal fees, and they wasted a year and a half or 2 years. So yeah, it's really easy to underappreciate how much control you're giving up with
Yeah,
that.
no kidding, man. That's the biggest thing that keeps scaring me away from it. It's like I want to write a book, and I've started writing a book. It's just like I just don't know. I don't know where to take it, and I don't know what to do with it. And I'm just like I keep finding myself in between all these different pieces of advice along the way. And but that's one of the biggest thing that scares me about traditionally publishing is just like, man, it would just be a bummer to
Yeah.
like pour my heart and soul into something that I'm really proud of and then have somebody else have ultimate control over where it ends up, how it gets distributed, or if it gets distributed, or if there's reorders. Like it seems like a
And if
lot.
and if you're an entrepreneur, like, you're giving up the optionality to maybe like build a course off of that content going
Mm,
forward. Or yeah, it's just a really it's a very interesting time for traditional publishing, I think. And I
yeah.
hope the model adapts. There's just so much that's changed. The context has changed around the model in a way that, made sense 100 years ago when you were like, you needed physical distribution, you needed to get it in bookstores, you needed centralized media connections, and you needed somebody to front the money to print all the books.
Right.
Like it was hugely difficult for an independent author to get a book off the ground and distribute it and get the word out 100 years ago. And now it's just not. We have print on demand. Most books are sold on Amazon. There's no gatekeeper to the retail. There's no capital upfront needed. And most people recommend books to each other on social media. And the sort of word of mouth, distribution takes care of the getting the word out. So, these publishers are still sort of priced like gatekeepers. And there's a lot of like, ruts in the woods that steer people that way. And
Yeah.
agents are still basically compensated for taking people to the traditional publishers. But the internet native publishing is still sort of like new and getting figured out, which is why there's this like kind of confusing explosion of all these different models and all these different options. And I think it'll be an interesting next sort of 10 years as these things all come together, and different authors come up with different business models, and new publishers sort of adapt to what they need.
And for marketing books too, it
Hmm.
seems like that's become completely decentralized. Before it was like there was a major draw to being with the traditional publisher because you might be more likely to get on Good Morning America or something like that.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's actually better to sell books on podcasts than it is to sell on traditional media anyway, right?
Yeah, I think so. That's another case where like the personal networks matter so much more. Like no amount of money can get you on Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
But if you have a a trusted connection or an established relationship or someone who can vouch for you in your personal network, like I've seen like we had an interesting case, like a single tweet from Naval sold more books than in like 1 week than another author getting on the New York Times bestseller list.
Wow.
Like we saw those things happening sort of in parallel, and we're like, very interesting.
Yeah. No
But like
kidding.
that kind of, we're all now in a realm where like the people we follow and trust for recommendations and the people that we trust the most can't be bought. And so it's really this interesting sort of like influencer meritocracy, word of mouth meritocracy of like who's willing to speak up on behalf of something that they truly like or someone that they truly like. And that's um, James Clear is really, really good at this. Like nobody has executed sort of the internet author playbook, I think, better than him in the last 10 years. And he had a really interesting thing that he shared. He's like on in the first 6 months that his book came out, he went on 200 podcasts.
Mine was one of
His
them.
pub his publisher booked four, and 196 he booked himself, him and one assistant.
Wow.
And so like that just kind of shows and a lot of that was like his very personal outreach and stuff like that. And
Hmm.
just being very personal, very thoughtful, and very high volume. I think he's a great guy, and he's very disciplined about the kind of doing the simple things at scale relentlessly. And there's a great sort of microcosm of the industry right now.
So is it impossible then to, like, if you go to this hybrid model, can you still have your book in airports? Can you still have your book at Barnes and Noble to, have that nostalgic walkthrough and pick up your book at a bookstore? Can you still, is it impossible to hit the New York Times bestseller list, or is it just more difficult? Like, what are some of these more nuanced
Yeah.
things that have traditionally been gatekept by the traditional publishing industry?
Sure. So a very interesting thing, airports are actually like pay to play for everybody because there's like so much foot traffic
Huh.
that everything you see there is like kind of a billboard, which I thought was very interesting, my kind of first time into the industry. Bookstores are interesting in that almost all of them, really all of them, like they make independent, almost by store decisions about what to stock.
Okay.
And, the average SKUs in a bookstore is like 25,000. At a big store, it's maybe a quarter million. So 25 to 250,000. There's like millions of books published every year and, nearly a million, I think, traditionally published books every year.
Wow.
So there is no path that guarantees you to be on any given shelf. What we're seeing is the books that take off online are the ones that get brought into the bookstores.
They have
So
demand. Yeah.
yeah, the demonstrated demand. Like the bookstores are, they want to give shelf space to the books that are going to move. They want to bring people in and see them pick up and buy books. So that's a very interesting thing where actually like it's not who publishes you that gets you into a bookstore, it's how well you're doing online, which is another case for like, what rights do you give up when? Like you can
Yeah.
always, and we see authors do this, like if they're popping online, you'll get offers from traditional publishers. You can go through that door in the future, and you can do it with leverage because, if they're watching you sell 100,000 copies,
Yeah.
you're like, look, I know I can do this. Like this is already moving. Maybe there's some ways you can help me, but like you don't come to the table hat in hand. Like you got,
Exactly. You better come to the
yeah,
table with a serious offer if you want to
right.
control my IP this time around.
Right. And you know what you're giving up. You're already seeing those royalties hit your bank account. And so you're like, well, I'm going to properly value myself and this asset that I've created that I just
Yeah.
spent years, building the audience for or collecting the content for. So I think that's a helpful model. Because the bookstore, the nostalgic, like see yourself in a bookstore thing is really important to a lot of authors. And we really try to talk a lot of people out of it because it's an outdated view of how the industry works that like if it's a real book it's in a bookstore,
Yeah.
or that bookstores are where big sales move. It matters, but it's not accessible to everybody by default, not necessarily, no matter who your publisher is. um, there's a third question in there but I can't remember what it was now.
Yeah. No, I want to go off that for a second because it's very
Okay.
similar to just retail, like any sort of retail SKU. Like
Right.
I was talking to somebody the other day who they got their drink going from direct to consumer, and they got they got it into a bunch of different, I don't know, Walmarts or something like that in certain parts of the country. And then they were just like, yeah, we thought that was the big win, but they're not going to reorder if they don't sell through the stock.
Yeah.
So now they're sending out actual crews of people to these locations where their drinks are at to promote people buying the drink at the store that they got the thing into. And it's like, well, it's bookstores are nothing but they're just retail bookstores. That's literally all it is. So it's the same
Yeah.
exact thing. Like, just getting it in there does not mean it's going to just fly off the shelves. If there's no demand, it's just going to sit there. Just like this person's drink was sitting on the shelf. Walmart's not going to reorder that drink. Like, that it's there's
Yeah.
not going to be a second order, which means that
And
like the book sales are finite, and they're only its only limit is your ability to market the book.
I think that's a great example. And it really, like, if you think about your own behavior as a customer, like when you go into a bookstore, it's usually to browse.
Mm.
Like your highest intent way to purchase a book is like pop open your phone literally right now after you heard the recommendation and order it.
Yeah,
And it'll be there in 24 hours. At least like that is my pattern. I love bookstores. I love going into them and I love browsing and I always wander out the stack of books. But I really, when it's high intent, is because I heard about it from somebody who's really, made a strong recommendation and it solves a problem for me right away. And so like I go pick up that book immediately
sure.
and, goes to the top of my list.
Yeah, I was going to say, but ever expanding library, and probably 90% plus of
Yes.
them have been ordered on Amazon. Even if I
Yeah.
go, especially if I'm traveling and I'm like in an airport, just like browsing through some books, I see
Yeah.
one or two that I like. I pull out my phone, I order them on Amazon, standing next to the book, looking at it. I order it Amazon. So it's just at my house when I get back home, instead of having to lug around 3 extra books with me the rest of the time that I'm gone. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's just easier.
Yeah.
It's more simple than walking out with a freaking stack of a dozen books. I'm just like, all right, I'll order that one. Or it's like
Yeah.
I'm shopping there and not buying anything. I almost feel bad for the bookstores
Maybe
sometimes.
this is well, maybe this is why they're getting paid for the shelf space, not the
Yeah,
margins on retail.
right,
Don't
right.
If you're at a local bookstore, just buy it from the bookstore. If you're in an airport, different game.
Yeah, very fair. Yeah, very fair. Yeah, if you're yeah, support the local bookstore if you're at the local bookstore. But yeah, when I'm traveling, it's just like I like to travel light.
Yeah.
So whenever I see a book, I'm like, oh, I don't want to forget it, so I'll just pick up a copy, and it's at my house by the time I get home. And
Yeah.
sometimes I come home to like 7 books. My wife is like, what are all these doing here? But yeah,
Look at
dude,
all the
I
space behind you. You could add hundreds of books back there.
that's
It
right,
just
exactly. Yeah, there's plenty of room. Yeah, I need a good backdrop anyway.
yeah.
Well, thanks for doing this, dude. I appreciate you coming on. Where can people go to learn more about Scribe or to get more from you specifically?
Yeah, scribemedia.com. Come schedule a consult with us. Short meeting, zero commitment. We just like to chat with people who are thinking about a book. Sometimes it's, takes months for the idea to come together, the timing to get right, and that's fine. We just love to meet you. All my personal stuff is on ejorgenson.com. I mean, my books are all available for free there. Scribe has written almost everything you need to self-publish a book. If you're not, if you don't want to hire us, that's fine. But like we kind of share everything we know and can help you get started and get your book out there.
ejorgenson.com. Go find some more from Eric over there. And guys, I'm not just saying this. The Almanack of Naval Ravikant should be a book that you absolutely have as a part of your library that you can just pick up. The great thing about it is like it's kind of written in this kind of meditations-esque way, like the book of Proverbs, where you can just pick it up, read some of it, put it back down. You don't have to you're not getting engaged in a bunch of different stories and you feel like you got to commit a certain amount of time. Just have it by the nightstand, have it on the toilet, use it instead of going through TikTok videos. Read a couple entries from the Almanack of Naval Ravikant. I promise you will not be disappointed in that. Eric, thanks so much for doing this. Everybody else listening, tuning in, remember, money only solves your money problems. However, it's a little bit easier to solve the rest of your problems if you got some money in the bank. So let's start with that problem first here on the Travis Makes Money podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Catch you next time. Peace out.